Hello, I'm Gary Lyon and welcome to Access All Areas. It felt like a strange weekend of football to end the season with 4 of the top 8 losing. Damien Barrett, did round 23 actually mean anything at all?
No, it didn't, did it, Gaz? The AFL didn't even think to worry about it too much. Allowed 2 teams to go into the round not being serious about selecting teams to win. And then even if you go in the bottom of the ladder, Brisbane Lions' win was actually a win that they could have well done without, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Glad they won. It was a great result for them. Whether or not it's the right thing long term, we can discuss. The most worries for the 4 losing sides. Dogs, Crows, Dockers or Kangas are all going to compete in this finals campaign. I think this is the great thing about this finals series, is that I don't think there's too many worries for any of them. And then the glaring one would be the Western Bulldogs' inability to find a ruckman through the course of a whole season, come up against Adelaide with Sam Jacobs, who's got the potential and has monstered them previously. So that would be the one I think that they've got to deal with, but everything else I think is in pretty good shape. And
it would have been a bigger worry for the Bulldogs too, wouldn't it, Gaz? Had Adelaide won the game against the Cats, they would have been playing that particular game at home, and that would have been a bigger issue for the Dogs. Yeah,
and wouldn't the Dogs love to have a game at home as well, which is another issue we're going to talk about.
Let's have a look at the configuration of the first week of finals. I mean, it's the matches are what they are, and Friday night it kicks off with the Eagles and Hawthorn.
Well, that's just going to be unbelievable. Let's just deal with that. That's almost a grand final right there from a Hawthorn point of view. Win that, they can win the premiership. Lose it, makes it very, very difficult.
You reckon that's where it comes from?
That's the crunch time. Otherwise they've got to travel twice, and that's going to be, or you think they're going to have to travel twice to Perth. Freo, Sydney, Swans decimated, talk about it in a minute. Bulldogs, Adelaide Crows, MCG, what the hell, Richmond v North Melbourne. I'd hate to be the losing side in that because that's a whole season down the drain, essentially. But, I mean, what about the Western Bulldogs? Why aren't they playing at Etihad Stadium? What's the point?
I haven't been given, or I don't think anyone's been given a good enough answer yet, Gaz. I mean, they have earned the right for a home final, and they're allowed to play it at that stadium that they played all year. I mean, the Geelong got the home final in 2013 down at their local ground. I mean, again, it's picking and choosing moments to display the integrity of the competition.
50,000 people would have been about right for the crowd, you'd reckon, and I'm also baffled. But we'll move on, we'll deal with it, they'll deal with it as well. Won't worry Luke Beveridge, by the way, he'll just get on with it.
Touch on the Swans.
Yeah, what about the
Kieran
Swans?
Jack out almost now for the remainder of the series. He might come back in a prelim, might come back in a grand final, but Buddy Franklin's form and injury woes are also a concern, Gaz.
Luke Parker, of course, the other one. So all of a sudden you've got that midfield group that have held them together for such a long time. You take Parker out of it, you take Jack out of it, you've got a question over Buddy. They've got to go to Fremantle, who've probably got the hardest-nosed midfield in the competition. I think it made life really difficult, or has made life difficult for the Swans.
Emotional game in so many ways down at Geelong on the weekend, Gaz, and the ball, when the siren went, the final siren, was in the hands of Paddy Dangerfield. Strange situation, this.
Well, look at the ovation. Geelong had banked the win, so they were gearing up for a massive send-off to their 3 superstars. And then Paddy's got the ball, the siren's about to go, and that's not Adelaide fans clapping. That is the Geelong group saying, oh, can't wait till those yellow and black and red stripes are replaced by the blue and white. We suspect that's going to be the case. It was just a funny and strange finish.
Yeah, it was. And it was because of what happened during the game. And Steve Johnson, who added his name to Kelly and Stokes late in the week about this being his last game, it was just a typical Stevie Johnson performance.
Well, a lot of people suggesting he played angry. This is the build-up of 13 years at the one club and being told that you're not going to be there the next year, and that happens. And we know what sort of a man he is. We know Mel Damo. He's an emotional person who thrives on getting the blood pulsing through his body, and this happened all day. He gets up here, he engages the crowd. I think he wanted to remember this. He ended up with a left foot torpy, which I think is one of the great scenes of the whole season. But I think in his mind he thinks he's got another year in him, and he thinks he's probably a bit slighted.
Do you think now that the emotion of that game is out of the way, and if he sort of thinks on his career that the Paul Chapman situation might be front and square in his deliberations on what he does?
I think all those things will go through his mind. I don't think he'll rush into a decision. I think the next couple of weeks the dust will settle a little bit, and maybe the Stuart Dew thing goes through his mind as well, which goes to another club and finds a premiership. But there's a joy to have him. And Kelly, I wouldn't count Kelly out.
Really?
No, 30 possessions, 9 tackles. You talk about Melbourne, and we're going to talk about Daniel Cross in a moment. Great service for a couple of years. I mean, James Kelly would still fit into a setup like that. And that's up to James Kelly.
Stokes?
I think Stokesy hit the nail on the head. That's all up to him. Yep. I mean, physically he probably can, but then mentally whether he can get himself up for another pre-season.
Okay. One player who definitely is changing clubs, Charlie Dixon, confirmed what we'd felt for some time ago, is leaving the Gold Coast Suns. He's nominated Port Adelaide as his club of choice, and I'd expect that deal to get done. It's buyer beware, though, with Charlie Dixon, as far as I'm concerned. So Port needs to be careful as to what they actually settle on by way of financial remuneration there.
Well, Port have put their cards in, so they're going to have to get the job done. Charlie, I think they've committed to Charlie Dixon. If Charlie's come out and said, that's where I want to go. So they've made a commitment. They have to get it done. What do they give up?
Was it first round pick? Which is about pick 10, as it stands?
Probably.
You reckon that's worth it for him?
Well, I think you take a lot on trust, a lot. His upside is big, but we haven't seen enough of it. Maybe get him into a system where the boundaries of what's acceptable and what aren't are much tighter than what have been a pretty loose setup at the Gold Coast. And I don't think a loose setup suits Charlie Dixon. I think a tight, structured, disciplined setup does and might bring the best out of him.
OK, well, we'll know in the next 48 hours, won't we, with the movements of some other players. Treloar's the one that we're waiting for. Yeah,
well, you've been on top of that since day one, led the charge there. Tell me about Cruiser. This is the interesting one. Matthew Cruiser, unsigned at Carlton. Carlton finish on the bottom of the ladder by virtue of an unexpected victory of Brisbane. Have Brisbane now exposed themselves to the fact that they get #1 pick Carlton? You got Shaki and Wiedering, two 6'4" kids who we think are going to be the Franklin Roughhead types of their time. If they lose Cruiser, will they be compensated with a second round pick? Well, as a pick 2.
A pick 2, yeah. Look, the AFL rules, guys, as I keep saying, are pliable enough to do whatever they want on this, and I refer to that now because one of those two clubs is so bad. They are both so bad. Brisbane Lions and Carlton are so bad. They cannot afford to have the other one get the first 2 picks in the draft. So
it'd be a disaster if both of those highly rated young kids went to Carlton and the Brisbane Lions missed out on one.
Yeah, as it would have been had Brisbane Lions.
Competition.
Yeah, as it would have been had Brisbane Lions been in that same situation with Leuenberger going out.
So pliable.
Pliable.
Nice
It's
word.
Nice. It can be bendable, Gary.
So
and you can push it back to the end of the first round if you need to. You can do that.
But then they turn around and say, well, hang on a minute, you let James Frawley go from Melbourne and they got a compensatory pick straight after they took Angus Brayshaw, so where's your pliability there?
Well, Cruiser's not an All-Australian as James Frawley was, so there's your little movement.
#1 pick.
That's your little pliable
He was the #1 pick.
And he was too, but no. Look, again, it's got to play out, but Brisbane Lions they'll bring the house down if they allow Carlton to get
I wouldn't blame them either. Hey, there's some news. There's just a bit of debate and talk about tunnelling over the weekend, and in particular the Richmond defenders. Now, it was put on the agenda by, I think Dermot might have put it on from a radio or television point of view, and then Drew Petrie sort of said, yeah, we're aware of it.
Yeah.
That's called body spoiling.
Right.
And
so you've gone through the tape here. You're not saying there wasn't too much tunnelling.
There was one. Okay. This one here.
Which I think was
that
paid.
One there, which was paid. That's Chaplin in the air and putting an elbow in the back, not severely, but nudging him under. That is tunnelling when your feet are off the ground. But everything else, full-bodied spoiling is allowed, and there's not an issue. That is, if that becomes an issue through the week, that is just finals hyperbole going nuts.
Well, it's in the minds of the umpires now that it is being made public.
Well, they're your mates, so just tell them to put it out of their minds.
Luke Hodge, got caught by the police last Thursday night into Friday morning. .068 was his blood reading, and 10 demerit points, financial fine. Hawthorn have now given him a $5,000 fine. They've balked at suspending him.
They have.
Good or bad call?
Pragmatic. And look, let's just clear something up. There is nothing in the rule book anywhere that says you miss a game of football if you are caught for doing something outside of the football environment. So let's clear that up straight away there. I mean, I've heard a lot of the discussion and arms in the air and throwing the toys out. That's not the case. I mean, he can still be made to be accountable. He can be made to address this. He can be made to do a whole host of things without having to miss a game of footy. So if that's the rules in place, believe it or not, I think Hawthorn get these things pretty right most times. So I can live with it. But I can understand other people saying he should miss a game. No rule says you have to.
I'll tell you what it means, though. The next time a club does suspend a player, don't for a minute think they're doing it for the greater good. They're doing it because that particular moment is a moment they can use to, I suppose, throw their chest out and say, look at us. Because had that been a Hartung or a Litherland, he wouldn't be playing this one.
I suspect that's the case as well. But also this, Damo. People say, if it was round 11, he'd miss a game. That might be right.
You almost certainly would.
That's right. But there's a severity as well. I mean, missing a final as compared to missing a round 11 is like saying, I'll fine you 5,000 or 50,000. So there has to be some moderation in that as well.
Yep.
So I trust Hawthorn to get these things right. I trust Luke Hodge to show the appropriate amount of remorse.
A man you have had a lot of time for, Gaz, over the course of his career. He's played at 2 footy clubs and went out in typical Daniel Cross fashion, with that happening to him late in his last game.
Well, I was watching this game, though, as you'd appreciate, almost fitting that going back with the flight of the footy knocked himself out. This is his wife, Sam, and emotional scenes down the front here. Look, I'm not around that footy club all that much, but I talk to people around it, and his impact as a footballer in 2 years has been as profound as any in recent times. They love him, they revere him.
Yep.
Matthew Boyd was there. He spoke to the Melbourne players as his best mate to make sure they're aware of how important he is. One to play on, Crossy, and to his credit, played unbelievable footy in the back half. I hope he stays. He's the sort of player you want to stay at that footy club. They've offered him a job, and I hope he stays. And I congratulate him and others, because there was a host of them that bowed out on the weekend, and the game will be poorer for not having them.
Yep. You're a studier of the cheer squads and the banners.
No,
that
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
You
this
are.
is your domain, and you wanted to bring this to the table.
Well, I'm going to read it because you can't see it. Sorry about this, Brisbane. It's a pretty harsh whack, but your logo looks a lot like the bloke from Nickelback. Now, I'm not a music man, Warrior. You're going to have to tell me.
Chad Kroger, Gary, he used to have long hair that looked like a lion.
Hey, nice. Looking forward to the final. It's going to be a fantastic build-up, a great week of footy. Thanks once again for watching Access All Areas. Keep an eye out for the wash-ups. They continue this week. The Magpies, the Giants and Port being picked apart. Have a good week. Goodbye.